Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my first review of a mobile game. This is going to be my review on Shadowverse. This is a collectible card game. Basically, the idea, like any card game, get your opponent from max health to zero. That's kind of the basic idea. Now, this game has multiple classes that you can play that have a variety of strategies. So first, I'm going to kind of let you know when I started playing the game. So this would have been around maybe 2017 or 2018, one of the two. For those that want more specifics, I started playing this game right before Portalcraft became a playable class. So that might give some of you old heads an idea of how long I've been playing. And I played mostly consistently. There were only like a few months I stopped playing the game for a while, but I played most of this game's existence. So I also got into this game because a friend of mine got me into it. An old good friend of mine. I was looking for a card game to play. I stopped playing physical card games like completely because it was just too expensive for me, and I wanted something that I could play for cheap, maybe on my phone on the go. This was recommended, and I've been playing ever since. Now, I'm going to be talking about a few different things. I'm going to talk about the gameplay and the balance together because I think they go hand in hand. I'm going to be talking about the story. I'm going to talk about how free to play friendly it is. And I'm going to talk about the voice acting. I think it's important for this game. So, we're going to start with gameplay and balance. So, in this game, you have a few classes that you can pick from where you build a deck. So, if I just go to like the tournament winning decks, there's a variety of classes with a variety of decks that you can try depending on the format. Now, what you can do in this game is you can play by yourself if you want to. You can either play the story, which there's a lot of stuff to talk about there, and then you also can do the practice mode where basically you can put your deck up against a computer, and that'll be a way of testing it without having to play against an actual player. And then once you feel more confident on how to play what you're trying to play, you can then try your hand at multiplayer and, either going through like the ranked play, or you could just do like a private match with friends, or just a regular play match. So there are definitely some varieties depending on where you're at. Now, when it comes to the balance of the game, because I think that's where a card game should be criticized, is how well do they balance the game? If you're the kind of person that likes to play certain classes, can you stick to it? Or is the game really trying to force you to play another class, which makes it not as fun? Well, in this game, I think you can be pretty successful with any class. So they have a format called rotation, where you can only play some of the most recent sets released. So if we play Magic the Gathering, it would be something similar to like block or type 2, something like that is basically what it'd be standard, whatever it is now. That's what rotation is. It's just a very limited format where you can only play a few different sets. And then you have what's called unlimited, where you can play basically any card you want. Now, with unlimited, there are some times where a card might get banned for a while. A card might be limited to one copy, which is something we're used to. Like in Magic the Gathering, I think you had like Type 1 where they had a ban list or certain cards you can only play one of. It's a similar concept, right? Now, for rotation specifically, I think they do a good job with this balancing. Even if you're playing a class, I'll just say Dragoncraft, where let's say the meta does not favor that class. That doesn't mean you'll never get wins. It means that you just won't be as consistent as some of the others. But if you're the kind of person that just logs in and just wants to do your dailies, you can be successful enough to do your dailies. You can get enough wins to get your dailies. So that's where I say that they do a decent enough job. It is difficult for any card game to balance it to where every class is equally as good. That's just impossible, I feel. But I do think that Shadowverse does a good enough job to balance it to where any class can do good enough, is kind of where I'm going with this. Now, at Unlimited, that is kind of a different story. The problem that I have with Unlimited is that there are some classes that do get favored heavily compared to others, to where some classes are unplayable. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons this happens is because in rotation, sometimes a card will get nerfed because it's too strong for rotation, and it makes it not as fun. So what they'll do is they'll kind of nerf a card to where it's still playable, but not as strong. The problem is when they nerf a card in rotation, they also nerf it in unlimited as well. So even though it's not affecting unlimited at all, they will nerf a card to the point to where it'll make a deck completely unplayable in unlimited, which is not what the intention was, which kind of messes the unlimited format up a little bit. I have a very specific example, but I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want this video to be too long. But there have been specific cards in decks that I played in the past that were strong at one time until a rotation nerf happened, and it made my unlimited deck completely unplayable. So that's where the balance kind of falls off. Is unlimited, they do kind of a poor job with that. And for unlimited, the balance has just been difficult in general. There are some classes that have always been heavily favored than others. So they do kind of a poor job with that. Now, if I was to give it an overall rating, if I'm going to say gameplay and balance, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It is still good overall. Like I said, for rotation, they do a great job. And the actual game itself is really fun. There are a lot of varieties in the decks you can play and how you can play and how you can get your victories, whether it be a strong combo deck, an aggressive deck, or just a control deck. I think that there's a good balance so that makes the game a lot of fun. But the balance itself, specifically for Unlimited, is where I had to give the most criticism to. But it's still good despite that. The next thing I want to touch on is how free-to-play friendly is Shadowverse. To be free-to-play friendly in a card game, it's, do you have ways to get materials, to get cards, without having to spend a lot of money, is what it boils down to. Like, if you're just a free-to-play player, or even if you're just like a budget player, could you be successful? And the answer to this is absolutely yes. When it comes to being free-to-play friendly, this game is top tier, and I'll explain why. So, typically you can buy cards by doing a few different things. You have what's called temporary trade cards, where basically part of your dailies you can, I think if you win so many times, I think it's 3 times in a day, you get these green gems that can be used to get cards that you can play temporarily. Now, well, when they say temporary, it just means that it's not considered yours, is what it means. It never went away or anything like that, but basically you can get a free copy of a card that would be considered temporary. I don't know if temporary gems is the right way to put it, because technically you just got to keep it. It never went away or anything like that. I think there was an expectation when this idea first dropped that after a certain amount of time you wouldn't be able to have the cards anymore, but they never got rid of it. So probably not the best name for it, but basically it was a way to get any legendary card, which is basically like, you know, the highest rarity of cards you can get. You can get one of any card you wanted. So this was another way for you to collect cards that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to get. Now, another thing you can do is you can buy a pre-built deck, but we're going to require money for the most part, so this doesn't necessarily count. And the other thing you can do is you can buy packs. Now, when it comes to packs, sometimes they have promos to where you can get like a free pack every day. You can get tickets sometimes for certain sets to get cards by just, you know, playing in the story mode, doing some of your dailies, stuff like that. Or even if you do well in certain, they have like arena tournaments where you can just participate. If you get like, you know, enough wins, you can get a certain number of tickets or whatever the case may be. There are a variety of ways to get tickets, or you can get rubies. Rubies are obtained also by playing story, by participating in tournaments, or what's called arena. And those are ways that you can get free to play ways to get cards. You need, I think it's like 1,000 if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. Yeah, it would cost you 1,000 of these rupees to do a 10 pull, which I always do 10 pulls. I've always been like that. But yeah, for 1,000, for basically for 100 rupees, you can get a pack of cards if you want. And sometimes you can be fortunate enough to get what you want. But let's say you pull on these free to play stuff, but you don't get the cards you want. Well, here's another neat little trick you can do. If you go to cards and you go to cards again, you can do what's called liquefying. So when you liquefy cards, that means you're getting rid of cards you don't want, and you can get, I'll just show you actually. Now, sometimes if you have extras, you can hit the extra button, or you can do select cards. And then let's say I don't like playing Dragoncraft, so, not Dragon, I'll say Bloodcraft. So any Bloodcraft card I want to get rid of, I can just start sliding up, or if you have a PC, you can just drag your mouse up or click it or whatever, and you can just start getting rid of all these cards you don't want, and it'll show you how many vials you're going to get. And I'll show you what these vials do here in a sec. So let's just say we're going to get rid of these. You just hit liquefy, and boom, you just increased the number of vials you have. Now, one thing that I do want to point out that I think is kind of a missed opportunity or an issue here is now with the extras tab, what that means is you can only have you can only use up to 3 cards of the same card in any deck. So there's a card called Insight where you just pay 1 to draw a card. Well, you can only have a maximum of 3 of those in any deck, right? Well, what I've noticed is, so in here, if you have like 5 of a certain card, you can hit extras, it'll get rid of the extra 2, and you're good to go. The issue that I've noticed is that you can also get what are called animated cards. They're basically like foils if you play like traditional card games, but basically they're cards that have the same picture, but they have like an animated background that just makes it more flashy and more pretty, basically. So if you have, say, 5 of an animated card and you hit extras, it won't count the animated ones. It'll only count the like regular versions of a card. So you actually have to go to select cards manually. Then what you have to do is you got to go to sort, and you have to go to, I got to find it, animated, and then you can see all the animated cards that you have, and you have to look at each one to see how many you have. And if you can find one that says 4 or 5, then you can manually just move it up and get rid of it too. And of course, if you get rid of animated cards, it'll give you a higher amount of vowels that you could use. Now, like for example, this card right here, I have 4 of that. Now notice on the extras tab, it didn't show up at all. So I would have to go up 1 to make it down to 3, liquefy, and then I would get some vowels for it. So that was kind of a thing that was kind of missed. I don't know if anyone ever called that out. I've never seen of anybody in a video call that out before. But that's kind of something that I think is a missed opportunity there. But what do these vials do? Well, let's say there's a card that you want, but you don't have, you never pulled it when you were trying to get packs. What you can do is, I can just do it through cards here. So let's just say I don't really play, let's say, Runecraft very often, right? So I'll go to Runecraft, I'll go to Legendary, okay? Now, obviously it's going to show a bunch of cards here because there are some cards that I have played, but let's just assume I didn't have, we'll find one that I only have like a temporary version of. So here's a card right here. Now, if I wanted to get this card, you can go to create and it'll cost 3,500 vials. So by getting rid of a bunch of extras I don't want, I can click this and it'll subtract that. And if I hit create, which I'll go ahead and do because it doesn't really matter at this point, boom, I'll actually have the card. Oh, and as far as an animated card, let's say if I do want to animate something, if you notice right next to the card, there is a thing below evolve that's kind of gold. Well, if you click that, you can use these things called Sears globes. We hit create, and now it has an animated background. So this is what I meant earlier by cards that are animated. They have like a little bit of like, spirally stuff going on, depending on what the card is. So that's kind of the only issue that I had with that. Is just say it doesn't do it automatically with animated when you're trying to get rid of extras. But anyway, there are lots of ways to bolster up your collection, getting specific cards that you need without having to spend money. This is how free to play friendly this game is. To the point to where I actually felt guilty for a while that I was able to just play this game, get all these cards I wanted, and I didn't have to spend a dime. Like, I have spent money on the game just because I like supporting the devs that make a game that I enjoy, but I never felt obligated. I never felt, man, if I just spend like $30, maybe I can do a few more pulls and get what I want. Like, I never had that happen in this game. And I played a lot of card games in my life, and there's always been situations where I'm like, man, if I really want to get this put together, I'm going to have to spend some money. I've never had that thought in this game. Like, this game is literally perfect 10, top tier when it comes to being free to play friendly. And it's for those reasons that I explained earlier. Very easy to make cards specifically that you need for your deck. Especially if you're the kind of player that only likes to play, let's say, one or two different classes. An easy way to just get all the legendary cards you need, and even lesser rarity cards that you just missed because you can get them on your packs. Those will be cheaper to get for you, a lot easier, and you can build the decks you want a lot faster. Such a great thing. So yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is obviously a 10 in terms of being free to play friendly. The next thing I'm going to touch on is the story. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers first and foremost, but this is just kind of giving my overall thoughts. So the story starts with the Morning Star, and then it goes all the way up to Whispers of Purgation. Now, there is a special thing, but that's something a little bit different. I'm not going to get into all that, but this is basically the story. So when the game started, you had this one Morning Star set of storylines, and you would get voice dialogue. So that was always nice, the fact that I can hear English voice acting. I do appreciate that. And they did a good job of like storytelling where they actually kind of showed the things that were happening. Now, they weren't like cutscenes where you see like, actual anime fights or anything like that, but you would see like a profile of a character on one side and a profile of a character on another side, and they would be doing dialogue, and you can kind of get the gist of what's going on. And of course, you didn't have to listen to a voice actor. You could just read it if you wanted to, but I like being able to hear it. So you were able to get full voice acted story. And of course, there were certain parts where we had to do combat. And of course, with combat, that means you're playing cards. So the way that it works is the class that you play depends on who is in the story, who is actively the person you're following. So, for example, Orisa, who's basically like the main character, in my opinion, is a forest card leader. So if the story was revolving around her, by the way, Orisa is the girl on the right side of the Morning Star. If the story was evolving around what she was doing and she had to do combat with somebody, you would have to play a Forestcraft deck. Now, this is where things might get a little iffy for some people. If you don't like Forestcraft, if you don't like that particular deck style or way to play, that could kind of be a roadblock for you because you might struggle to win. Now, what the game did eventually do for people that were struggling is they would let you borrow decks for free to get through the story. And as long as you kind of have a basic idea of how to play it, you can do well. So I would say that would probably be the only thing that I was a little iffy about, was the fact that it sucked that I was forced to play, a class that I didn't want to play for the sake of story. I honestly feel like, I get why they did it. It's more immersion, if you will, because it almost wouldn't make sense if there was a Forestcraft character and I'm playing a Dragoncraft deck, right? So I kind of get it. But I think they made up for it by allowing you to just borrow a deck that you could just play with if you're struggling too much. If you don't have the cards for that class because you don't play it, that was a cool way to do it. So they did a good job there. Now, as far as the story itself, overall, I think it's a good story. I really, I would say that if there was one thing that I look forward to in this game more than anything else, was any story updates. These stories were just great. A lot of these are just different worlds that the main characters had to travel to. I'm not going to go into why specifically, but there was a reason they were traveling to multiple worlds. But it is a very, very good story. I absolutely love how they did this. What's funny is there are Shadowverse animes that exist, and honestly, I don't think they're any good. I kind of wish there was an anime that was literally this story in this game. I think if you had an anime, it would be probably a pretty long series, but if you had an anime that was just off of the story of this game, I think it would be excellent. I would love to be able to see some of not only just the story and how they communicated, but even like the fight scenes that would happen too. That would be so awesome. So yeah, I'm in love with the story of this game, 100%. I look forward to these more than I look forward to new card sets. I'll put it to you that way. And new cars coming out is always an exciting thing, but to me the story was even more exciting because it was just a very good story. The only criticism I'll give on the story is I thought that the ending wasn't very satisfying overall. There was a certain part of the story that I felt it could have ended and it would have been fine, but they kept going because they were trying to more or less introduce a new Shadowverse. So they added more story to kind of introduce different characters and the fact that, hey, there's more to come kind of a thing, which to me kind of ruined it a little bit, but it was still okay. They did kind of bring a few things all back together, which was kind of nice. So I'm not going to harp on it too much. Like I said, the overall story was good. Just the ending I thought was a little, I don't know, off. But if I had to give it a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it an easy 9. Like, it's an excellent story and definitely something I would have wanted to see in anime form. Because unfortunately, the actual animes of Shadowverse, to me, are just not that great. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to go over is the voice acting in this game overall. Now, I did just touch on the story, and I mentioned that they had, voice acting for all of the dialogue, which I think is great. But the other part of the voice acting is the fact that anytime a card is being played, there's always somebody voicing a kind of an entrance phrase. Coming to get you now, or whatever the case may be. You'll play a card, it'll say a different phrase. Whenever a card dies, they have its own. Each card has its own battle cry, and when a card evolves, they say something unique. It's just so many things that are added to this game, really for more immersion, that I think is just excellent. And I think that the voice acting for these cards are just absolute top tier. They have a variety of accents, nice, interesting cultural stuff. Like, for example, there's a world that you can go to in a story that's kind of like an old Wild West kind of thing where everybody kind of talks country. I think that the way they did the voice acting for that was just pure top tier awesomeness. And with the cards that came out and when you play them, all the things that they said and how they said it, it was just perfect to me. I thought it was just so good. Like, the voice acting with a lot of the cards that came out were just has some of the most fun and interesting phrases that people in the Shadowverse community, I'm sure, made their own memes off of it. Like, that's just how crazy it was. I think they did an excellent job with voice acting, and of course, and I'm talking about English voice acting because I know some people don't like English voice acting. The English voice acting in this game is absolute top tier. So I'm just gonna tell you right now, scale of 1 to 10, it's a perfect 10. And I'll be honest, voice acting in games is not something I really talk about very much because in most games they're just okay. This is one of those games where it's like top of the line, that I could actually brag about. There's very few games where I can seriously praise the voice acting on, and this is definitely one of them. So I wanted to bring that up. Again, voice acting, absolute top tier. So thank you for all of that stuff. So with all that being said, if I was to rate the game as a whole, This game overall would be a 9 out of 10. Like I said, the fact that it's free to play friendly and has great voice acting is great. Has an excellent story, and the gameplay balance is actually pretty decent despite a few flaws. And that makes this game absolutely worth playing. Now, do I recommend people play this game right now? Not really. And the reason is because in 2014, they basically stopped all updates for new cards and new story, mainly because they were making room for Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. Now, for those who don't know, Worlds Beyond was supposed to come out in 2014, but the game got delayed for almost a year, I'd say. So we've had to wait a long time for the new game. So there have been no major updates, unfortunately. So this game has basically ended, so that's why I don't recommend people play it. But Worlds Beyond is coming out in mid-June. I want to say the 17th, I believe. So if you really enjoyed Shadowverse and you're kind of questioning if Worlds Beyond will be good enough to try, or even if you have never played Shadowverse at all, with what I've told you about this game, I have to imagine that the next game is going to be just as good. I'm not going to try to tell you that it's going to be much better, but I want to believe that it'll be just as good as this game at the very least, because I enjoyed this game the many years that I played it. And so even though I don't recommend playing this game right now, that does tell me that I recommend people play the sequel, assuming it'll be just as good. So hopefully the sequel will be as good as I think it is, and we'll have a good time with it. So thank you for listening this whole time about my very first mobile game review. Again, this is Shadowverse is a 9 out of 10, and I am very grateful to Side Games for making this game in general and keeping up with the updates and everything. Until next time, take care, everyone.